Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going global, looking at some breaking news and events from around the world. And of course, this Deep Dive is brought to you by Alarms.Global.
Stay curious, stay informed.
Exactly.
It's quite the collection we have today. Really shows how events that seem completely separate can actually be connected.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's start in Ecuador, where there are indigenous groups launching an uprising against the President Daniel Noboa. And it all goes back to power outages across the country.
And the thing about Ecuador is that they really rely on hydropower for their energy.
Oh, so they're vulnerable then when it comes to...
Exactly. When you have droughts like they've been having.
And we all know climate change is making those worse.
It is. And what we're seeing in Ecuador is how much climate change can impact not just the environment, but
everything.
Yeah, political stability too, social stability.
It makes you think about all those times when power's gone out, even for a little bit. You know, it's annoying, but imagine if it was.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. And then on top of that...
Political unrest. It's a tough situation. And it really shows why it's important to have different energy sources, you know, and to make sure your infrastructure can handle it, especially in places that really depend on just one thing, like hydropower.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, Jen.
Okay, so let's move on to something that has big implications for global security. The UN nuclear chief is visiting Iran right now, specifically their nuclear sites at Fordo and Natanz.
And those are at the heart of Iran's nuclear program, which has been
Controversial.
And Fordo especially, it's underground.
Oh, wow.
Hard to monitor.
So this isn't just a casual visit then?
No. The international community is very concerned about what Iran is doing, and this visit is a chance to see what's actually going on.
See if they're following the rules.
Right.
Okay, high stakes. So let's shift gears to something a little more positive. Azerbaijan is investing $1.2 billion in green projects by 2030.
Interesting, because they're a big oil and gas producer.
Right.
But this is part of a bigger trend globally. More and more countries are realizing they need to move to low-carbon economies.
What kind of green projects are we talking about here?
It's still early, but probably solar and wind power, and also making things more energy efficient and lowering emissions.
Sounds promising. But I bet it's not easy to just completely change how you get your energy.
Of course not. It's expensive and complicated. There's the technology and the economics, and you can't disrupt the energy people are already using.
So finding that balance.
Exactly.
Speaking of delicate balances, we have to talk about the various security concerns popping up around the world. Just today, there was a bomb threat at Mumbai's Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport. A flight to Azerbaijan was the target.
Huh. Almost seems connected to what we were just talking about.
Doesn't it? And there's more. Russia's special envoy for Afghanistan is visiting Pakistan.
And that they're talking about regional stability.
Then in Yemen, the Houthi group is threatening retaliation after those recent U.S. airstrikes. And because Australia was involved in the bombing, they're increasing security at an airport there.
So many things happening, but they all seem to point to growing geopolitical tension around the world.
Like a domino effect. One thing leads to another.
Exactly. And it really shows you just how connected our world is. Things happening in totally different places can still be intertwined because of politics, economics, history. It's complicated. It is complicated. And it just emphasizes how connected everything really is. You know, these things are happening all over the place, but they're still all tied together.
Okay, well, let's change gears for a minute and talk about some economic news. Vietnam is getting rid of anti-dumping duties on stainless steel from several countries, including China.
Interesting. Anti-dumping duties are basically there to protect a country's industries from cheaper goods coming in from somewhere else.
Yeah, like a barrier.
Right. So by lifting those duties, Vietnam's saying...
What do you think they're saying?
Could be a few things. Maybe they want to get closer to China trade-wise. Or maybe they're trying to help their own manufacturing by making the materials cheaper.
So I'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Okay, but with all this political and economic stuff going on, we can't forget about the people affected by these events. I mean, Typhoon Yagi in Myanmar was just devastating.
Absolutely. And there are flood warnings in Kenya, too. More people could be displaced.
These humanitarian crises show how important international cooperation really is.
They do.
Especially in places like Myanmar, where it's already unstable politically.
Exactly. It's tough to get aid to those who need it.
So what can we do?
Well, the international community has to work together to figure out how to help, no matter what the politics are.
Makes sense. Okay, before we wrap up, let's hit a few other things happening around the world. BYD, the Chinese electric vehicle company, is launching new models in Chile.
And there's been fighting between Israel and Lebanon. 5 Israeli soldiers were killed.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, Ukraine and Norway are increasing their defense cooperation.
Probably because of the conflict.
Most likely. And on a more positive note, Japan is giving Pakistan money to help them deal with flooding.
Nice. So we've talked about a lot today.
We have.
The world is constantly changing. It's amazing.
It is. And it just shows why it's so important to stay informed and try to understand what's driving all these events, you know?
It can be overwhelming, though, right? There's so much information out there.
It can be. But I think we did a good job today breaking things down and giving some context.
I hope so.
All right.
I think so. So before we go, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about what's making headlines. But what about the stuff that isn't?
That's a great point. There are always things happening that we don't even know about. Things that are still important.
Like we're only seeing part of the story.
Exactly. So if you want to dig deeper, I'd say don't just believe everything you hear, you know? Look for different perspectives and be open to learning new things from different sources.
Stay curious.
Exactly.
So true. Well, thanks for joining me for this deep dive. And to everyone listening, thanks for being here. And remember,
Stay curious, stay informed.
that's right. And a big thanks to our sponsor, Alarms.Global. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it really is like there's this whole other layer to everything.
Right, and it reminds me of that thing with Vietnam, lifting those duties on stainless steel.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, it's just like, okay, economics, but it could be about so much more.
Like what?
Maybe they're trying to get closer to China,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
trying to become more powerful in their region. It's those connections that make it fascinating.
It's like a giant game of strategy.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to stay informed, to keep learning, to keep questioning.
Because the world never stops changing.
Never.
Yeah.
And the more you understand it, the better you can deal with all the changes and be a part of making things better.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in and staying curious with us. And don't forget to check out Alarms.Global.
Stay curious. Stay informed.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.